What if I told you that the version of you are probably most proud of, the version of you who's done everything right, checked all those boxes, that that version of you is actually the one person that's in the way of your life? I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've been thinking about this because I myself have died on the altar of doing everything right, keeping everything together, all the balls in the air, and thinking that my performance, that my doing everything right, my checking all the boxes and pleasing all the people and doing the things that I've been told I should do, that was going to give me security. That was going to give me that sense of safety and accomplishment in my life. And instead, I found myself in shambles in my life. I found myself in a double life. I found myself really at my rock bottom. And it was only there when I finally figured out the secret, how it was to get into a centered life. And it just so happened that it started to happen for me in midlife, and it happens for many of us in midlife. Today, we're going to talk about the great unlearning. That's what I'm calling this. The great unlearning of the absolute sham, the absolute fallacy that doing everything right is somehow the end all be all, and that we should be striving towards that. In fact, I am going to say that midlife can be an invitation for all of us to look at the mess that our life is, wherever we're at, and love it right there. And that is the only thing that's going to save us.
Welcome. You're listening to The Centered Midlife, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started.
Welcome back, everybody. If you haven't noticed already, there's a brand new look to the podcast and a little bit of a new name. We're going to call this the Centered Midlife. Used to be Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving. It's quite a mouthful. Thought we would simplify. And it's not just the centered midlife, but what I want us to work on this year in season 4 is how to reclaim our self-worth during midlife and doing it the right way this time, instead of from the outside in, proving ourselves to others and to the world and doing all the right things, checking off all of the things on our list by doing everything right. I want us actually to reclaim our self-worth from the inside out. And that is where we're going to start this year. And I think that the best way that I can help us understand what I'm trying to get at here is just to use some life examples. So I want to take you back. I want you to come back with me to a holiday dinner that I put together. And this holiday dinner was one where my entire in-law family and extended in-law family was going to be there. So there were grandmas and grandpas, and there were aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody. And the house that my husband and I had built was, huge and had the capacity to do this. So this was kind of always our dream, right? I thought I was doing everything right. I thought that I was on top of things. This holiday dinner was something I put a lot of time, a lot of effort in. Do you hear yourself in this? Because I don't think I'm alone, right? I don't think that I'm alone in believing that, I was supposed to get married and I was supposed to have kids and I was supposed to do the holiday dinners as part of this idea of checking off the boxes and doing everything right, right? Doing what I should do. And I say should in quotations here because honestly, uh, we end up shooting all over ourselves when we're in this predicament. But I'm taking you back. I can still kind of feel the weight of the dishes. And I remember having Cornish hens and a ham because I had different people that like different kinds of, proteins and poultry and meats. I overdid it probably because that's just who I am. And that was how I showed up to things and how I thought I was creating safety and security. Now, meanwhile, my husband of the time had told me that he needed to leave early that day on a business trip. So we were celebrating on a Sunday. The family was going to, drive back in the morning, but he needed to catch a plane that evening. So midway through all of the time and the effort that I had put forward, I just watched him walk out the door. And it wasn't even my family that was over, it was his family, which is our family. I know, I understand. It's my kids' cousins, those things. But there was something about it that didn't sit right. Right. But here's where I doubled down, my friends. I wanted to be the best wife and I wanted to come across like it didn't bother me a lick. And even when my mother-in-law asked me about it, and even when my sister-in-law asked about it, and even when my father-in-law asked about it, all at different times, by the way, I said to each and every one of them, I'm totally fine. This is totally normal. This is part of his job. He needs to fly out of town. Now, I will learn not very much long after that holiday dinner that actually where my ex was going was to a double life that he was creating somewhere else. And I had no idea. But I think that isn't really the point of the story so much as what it is that you're seeing in this moment in my life, in this little snapshot that I truly believe while I'm dying on the altar of doing everything right, that I'm going to create safety and security in my life. I really believe that in that moment. And I think it's the efforts that I'm putting forth that are doing that. And I think, hey, I got this. Like I'm on top of it. And yet, not very long after, things started to crumble. And in the shambles that I was crushed into after that, that was where I finally figured out this secret of how to reclaim my self worth from the inside out. So you hear this story and you're like, yeah, been there, done that, got divorced, or, figured out that I was hustling for my worth. And what do you want me to do with this, doc? Like, what do we do now? Right. Well, I bring this is only one story I'm going to share today, but I bring this story because I think that it exemplifies so well, at least in my lived experience, where that fallacy really started to crack. I mean, it didn't crack until a little bit after this holiday dinner, but I knew it in that moment, right? Like it felt wrong in my stomach that that person was walking out the door. It felt like, I'm doing it all the things. I'm doing all the things right. Like why is this happening? Why does this not feel good to me that this person is walking out the door? Because honestly, that was evidence of how unsafe and unsecure the relationship was for both of us, right? Like this is not a pointing fingers thing. Like we were both part of what created the disillusionment of that. But I think that it exemplifies so well how this fallacy kind of plays out in our lives. And not only that, but how it is a recipe for exhaustion and burnout and it just basically not liking your life anymore, right? Because what would happen is I would do a big thing like that and then, man, it just fell flat. Like I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't actually feel safe and secure. And I would keep doubling down, right? So like in that moment, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm demonstrating what a good wife and mother I am and sister-in-law and all the things. I don't like it that you're leaving my house, husband, but you know what? I'm going to double down and I'll be a good wife and I'll pretend that it doesn't bother me at all. And I won't let anybody else see that. as if that was what was going to create, some kind of safety for me, some kind of security for me. But I truly believed it. Like I was blinded. I really believed this was it. I had put all my chips in, man. I had put all my chips in. So on, the back end of this, when I start to learn that there is a double life, that it's not a work thing, it's something else completely. I realized for myself there was something wrong in that recipe, right? There was something wrong. And so, shortly after having been divorced, I can remember really seeing how I had participated in my own suffering. And as you start to glimpse that, it's a really hard time. It's a really, really hard time. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I want to talk about how I showed up to that differently than I'd ever done before in my life, and how that is the secret sauce that I want to preach about from the rooftops, from the mountaintops, from the whatever tops. I want you to understand how to do this. So that story exemplifies it. And here's where we are. I'm going to use a metaphor, and you may have heard this metaphor before, but it's the difference between the lighthouse and the tugboat. And I think that this analogy is going to be really helpful in what I'm trying to get across today. So that holiday dinner, I'm a tugboat. That marriage, I'm a tugboat, right? The whole idea of investing in this perfectionistic idea that if I do everything right, I'll be okay. That is, you are the tugboat in the bay that, goes out and grabs those boats that are having trouble and tugs them back in. And you are putting all of your fuel and all of your effort and all of your time, person at a time, one boat at a time, trying to fix things, right? Bringing them in and bringing them in and bringing them in. This is an inefficient way to create safety and security in your life, right? I understand that part of who I am as a person, part of my value is I want to give. I want to be somebody that helps people. I know that sounds just so cliche, but it's just true. It's who I am. I get a lot of reward from that. But what I was getting during that time of my life was exhausted. That's what I was getting. I was getting burned out. I was not getting any return on this idea, but I fully believed it was just because I wasn't doing it well enough. I wasn't doing it hard enough. And I would keep doubling down and I would keep at it until there was nothing else to do, right? Like until the floor fell out from underneath me. And to be honest, I don't know. I could still be in that. I could be still hustling that way today had it not happened that way. Now, I don't think that everybody needs to have some great big awful thing happen to them in order to learn this lesson, which is why I'm putting it out on the podcast and why I want you to hear this. But the tugboat analogy is powerful. It doesn't work. All it does is puts forth an effort that is insurmountable, non-sustainable, and you are going to buckle at some point underneath that if you don't figure out another way. So the lighthouse, on the other hand, is a very interesting in juxtaposition with the tugboat. It's very interesting how you could take the value of wanting to be helpful and love people and show, what you have, shine what you have. But that lighthouse stays in one spot and it helps lots of boats in the bay, but only if they want to use the light, not if they don't. Right? It's not chasing after them. It's not going to grab them and pull them back in. It's going to solidly and consistently show its light over and over. And if you want it, you come and get it. And if you don't want it, that's on you. That is where I wanted to get to, right? Now, I'm going to tell you another story that is really, it's tough on me, but I think it also exemplifies when the bottom really fell out, when I really finally kind of held space for how I had participated so much in my own suffering. So there's like this holiday dinner, which exemplifies when I was in it and not realizing it, until I found out later. Of course, I got divorced. Of course, I was living on my own, single mom again. Many of you know from earlier podcasts that that was also a time where my son moved out of my house and in with his dad. And so for all of his 4 years of high school, he lived with his dad. He didn't live with me. And that was a gut punch, like beyond all measure. That was the first glimpse of what was happening, but it was so painful and I was so broken at that time. I wasn't able to really see it for what it was. But the the story that exemplifies the most when I really settled in and realized there is not a payoff to doing everything right. In fact, the payoff is that you may have sacrificed the very things that you love the most. Like I sacrificed having my son, like I sacrificed having a life that was safe and secure and he would have wanted to be a part of with me. I was sitting at a graduation dinner. So he had just graduated from high school, and the people at the table are my younger daughter next to me, who's, I don't know, probably like 6 at the time, 7-ish at the time. And then there's his dad and his half sister and his stepmother, and his girlfriend came with us and her parents. And that's kind of the atmosphere, right? And I'm sitting at this table and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but in this moment, I am feeling like separate from what's happening. Like I'm watching it, but I'm not participating in it. And I had this overwhelming sense of just sadness, honestly. Now, a lot of you might say, well, this is because you're going to start empty nesting and those kinds of things. But that wasn't what that's the realization that I was having in that moment had less to do with that piece, which I had had to work through honestly over the 4 years that he wasn't living in my house, because I had already kind of, you know, distanced myself from having him in my life every day. That moment, I was so sad because I'm looking at all these people enjoying him and seeing him, have this accomplishment, seeing both of them because his girlfriend was there. And it was clear to me they were all participants in that with him, all participants in that with him. And I recognized in that moment, I've spent all my life doing the right thing. And the right thing got me exhausted, burned out, divorced, rejected. And it sacrificed the one thing that meant everything to me, which was my kids, my son in this particular example. So I left early, excused ourselves, and went home. And I cried. Like I just lost my mind crying because I really let myself hold the negative impact that believing in that fallacy that doing everything right is the way I should live my life and that is somehow going to bring this great outcome for me, that it was all a lie, that it was all a lie. And it was a lie that I told myself, and it was a lie that the world tells us and that we buy into, all of those things, right? I wasn't mad. I wasn't accusing anybody. By that time, I really wasn't even mad at myself about it anymore. Not long before that particular dinner was when things started for me, like a couple years before that, about when he was in middle of high school, when things started for me where I started to pull myself back together. And from the inside out, I started to heal myself by seeing my own worth, by understanding that my performance never had anything to do with this, that hustling was never what was going to create impact in my life, that I had value just because I was. And that the only thing that was going to save me when I had lost absolutely everything that I could think of was to love myself. And I don't know why that epiphany came, but it did. A small intuition voice inside me. And I knew in that moment that I was in the paradox of knowing that that was true, that I was going to have to love myself through this, that I am the only me that I ever get, and I'm going to be stuck with me for the rest of my life. And all these people are going to leave me at some point. It's all of the jobs, all of the people, all of the things are going to keep changing, keep, evolving across time. That will always be what's happening. And the only person that I always have is me. So I understood this to be true. Like, if I'm gonna get better, I have to love me because I'm the only one who's with me always and will be with me always. And on the other hand, I knew I had no clue how I was gonna do that. Not an inkling. how I was going to get myself out of that hole. So that realization had already happened for me while I'm sitting at the table watching these people have this beautiful moment with my son and feeling like I was an outsider in that, right? Grieving the impact that living, the lie of believing if I did everything right that I would have a good life, like what I had really sacrificed as a result of that. This is a tough couple stories to put together for you, but they are definitely representative of that Tugboat and Lighthouse. I knew that Lighthouse loving me was I'm going to stay in one spot and I am no longer going to go out and pull ghost boats that aren't even real, because my marriages weren't real. Like the stuff that I was hustling for, it wasn't real. I'm not going to spend my fuel and my energy and my time doing any of that anymore, one at a time, because it's useless. It's maybe in the moment I have some gratification, but long term, I'm a tugboat that blows her engine, that burns out, right? No, I'm going to be a lighthouse. I'm going to take care of that lighthouse. I'm going to make sure that light shines bright, and I am never going to leave that lighthouse's side. I will be there. And I know if I do that, I have more impact than if I decide to go out in that tugboat and help people again. So I started the process of loving myself, learning how to love myself, right? Learning how to take care of me, learning how to let go of programming and conditioning that told me that that was a selfish thing to do, and showing up for myself over and over and over. And I made mistakes and I didn't do it well. And I still today am growing in that. But I want you also to be growing in that. I want you also to join me in this centered midlife where we reclaim our self-worth from the inside out. I really want that for you. And I think that you really have to acknowledge that the kernel of wisdom in this story really is that at your lowest, you have not earned shit. At your lowest, at your rock bottom, in shambles, when your life is not what you wanted it to be, even though you served on the altar of doing everything right. It's that moment that the shift happens from performance to loving yourself and knowing you have worth. You're loving yourself in the worst moment of your life, right? That's what I did. If midlife is a struggle for you right now, if you are just done with the growing pains of it all, not to mention that your whole physical body is just seems to be your enemy at this moment. If this is an opportunity for you to show up to this mess of midlife and say, I love you more now than ever. I love me more now than ever. I want you to say that to yourself. I love me more now than ever before. That's the pivot, right? We have to get out of this performative idea that we can work harder, we can do it better, we can be more perfect, we can be the best, version of ourselves in this role and that role and this role. That we are deserving of our own love no matter what, even when we're at our worst. And when you show up for yourself at your worst, the power of that pivot is huge. And I think midlife is an invitation for this. I do. I think a lot of us are real uncomfortable right now for all sorts of reasons. But in your midlife, whatever that is, I want you just to meet her right there and love her. I want you to just start there. It's that kernel. We're going to talk all season long about different ways for you to show up for yourself. I'm going to give you some insights on my journey, how I've done that, what I've researched, what the science says, what I've helped other clients, coaching and clinical to do. But today, I just want you to walk away from this knowing this kernel. I just need to pivot and love myself at my worst, because then I'm really loving who I am and not the product that I'm putting out in the world, not how I'm hustling, not how I perform for other people, not my role, none of those things. I just love me in the mess. That's the pivot that you need to have at this point in your midlife to get to a centered midlife. So I invite you to think about this. Where in your life, where in your life are you dying on the altar of doing everything right? Where are you sacrificing too much? Where are you a tugboat, depleting your energy and your fuel when you're only pulling in one person at a time? Gratification is not, the outcome is not giving you what you really want, which is to love your life, right? To just be content, maybe even experience joy. Ugh, like we could only hope. Where is that happening in your life right now? I want you to journal about this, to reflect about this, to go for a walk and think about this, to call a girlfriend and talk about it. Shoot, go online, post it on any of my social media, and I will listen to it and I will respond to it. I promise you. I want you to think about this long and hard. I do. Because I think that this is the piece, this is the place that you're going to start to feel better. This is the pivot that you need. And after you've spent some time in that reflection, I want you to remember this, okay? We are reclaiming our self-worth from the inside out. And what that really means is you do not need to fix yourself. You just need to find yourself and love her right here.
Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these two crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741 to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.